program now, U.S. Integrity, to talk about UFC 250 tomorrow night. Matthew, first of all, awesome job on this show and with the card last week, picking a bunch of winners. Tip of the cap, man.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. Thanks, Mitch. Thanks, Matt, for having me on this morning. Exciting card. A little bit, more high-profile fights this week than we saw last week on the Fight Night card.
I want to begin with this. Any observations from the card last week with the smaller octagon, now at only 25 feet as opposed to 30, that you can apply to the card tomorrow night?
Well, I think that you're going to see a little bit more engagement from fighters. So it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to see more knockouts or that it favors strikers more than grapplers necessarily. It just means that the fighters are actually engaged more and that you're not seeing as much circling around the ring. The one thing that I did notice last week, and I've seen it now over the course of the no fans in the arena fights with the UFC, is that the announcers themselves are having an effect on the judges. We talked last week how we thought the audio, the guys that throw big whooping hooks, a lot of kicks, even if they land on the arm or the gloves, they're loud, and how that was influencing the judges, just the audio of some shots in the arena. I also noticed last week Michael Bisping, who tends to have a loud, boisterous voice, and that whatever he said in the fight, as far as this fighter's winning the round, tended to end up what was happening, despite the fact there was a lot of disagreement and contentiousness from a lot of experts on that. And I wonder if the judges sitting so close to these announcers who hear them talking, you look at this guy, say, hey, he's a former UFC champion, he must know what it's talking about. It certainly could have some influence on the judging that's taking place in the arena.
That's a great observation. Okay, let's begin with the headliner. Nunes in action. She's a gigantic favorite. What do you think of the opponent, Spencer, here? And if you're going to bet Nunes here in the match, do you look something like maybe by KO or TKO? And I'll throw this at you, Matt. I noticed that PointsBet put up Nunes in the under 2.5 at plus 126. Or Nunes in the over 2.5 is plus 116. I'm intrigued by both those bets.
Yeah, absolutely. And Felicia Spencer's 8-1 with her only loss to Cyborg Santos, and she actually went the distance in that fight with Cyborg Santos. And the one thing that I think we can take away from that fight is she has a heck of a chin and she can really take a punch. But the other takeaway from that fight is she didn't duck any punches. I mean, she blocked every punch with her face. That's not probably going to work out too well against the greatest striker in the history of women's MMA. What's also interesting here is you mentioned Nunes by knockout, which is probably the most likely scenario here, considering Spencer doesn't duck any punches. Nunes is the hardest hitter in women's MMA history. But Nunes is also a much better submission grappler than people give her credit for. And Felicia Spencer is going to be looking for the takedown. So it's possible that Spencer gets a takedown or gets in the clinch, and it's actually Amanda Nunes who secures a submission finish here. So Nunes by submission, not out of the question here, despite the fact that Felicia Spencer is a grappler. Look, the one, I always look at underdogs and say, what's their path to victory? And it's a little bit hard to find one here for Felicia Spencer since Nunes' ground game is so good, as well as the fact that she's such a devastating striker. But the total on this fight is 1.5 rounds over minus 190. If Felicia Spencer has the same inability to defend strikes in this fight as she did in the Cyborg fight, it is certainly possible that Amanda Nunes, who has several short stoppages, including blasting out Cyborg Santos in 30 seconds, could get an early finish here. And at plus 160, that might be worth a look.
Hey, Matthew, I've heard of people give Spencer credit for that Cyborg fight, but I just don't think Cyborg's anywhere near the fighter she used to be. Is that accurate?
Oh, 100% accurate. Yeah. And what's more than interesting about that is that not only is Cyborg not the fighter that she used to be, but she landed almost every single strike she threw against Felicia Spencer. Mm-hmm. So I'm really worried about Spencer's ability to last too far into this fight.
I'm seeing it at one book. I think it might be PointsBet again. Nunes is plus 850 by submission.
I saw that. Minus 182 by KO or TKO, plus 850 by submission. I can't see this Matt going the distance. I think Nunes is going to take her out pretty easily.
I do as well, and that's why I think the under 1.5 rounds at plus 160, might be worth a look if you're trying to bet this fight and not lay a big price.
What's your favorite bet on the card?
My favorite bet is Corey Sandhagen. And throughout the history of the UFC and MMA, what we've seen is gyms really get hot. Team Alpha Male for a while had a big run. Yep. The American Top Team guys had a big run at one point. The Rufus Sport guys, when Anthony Pettis was lightweight champion, his younger brother Sergio was a surging flyweight. You had Paul Felder up there. We've seen gyms sometimes when you get the right combination of striking and grappling coaches and guys training together where they just all elevate each other. And speaking of elevating each other, no pun intended, Elevation Fight Team is the hottest gym in MMA right now. Trevor Whitman is the hottest striking coach in MMA period right now. We talked about Trevor Whitman and the amazing job he's done over there a couple of weeks ago when we all got on Drew Dober against Alexander Hernandez. Same thing here. Corey Sandhagen is training with the best people in the world. Look if you had just bet the Elevation Fight Team guys lately. Justin Gaethje, Drew Dober, Alistair Overeem. They're all getting wins. Curtis Blades is training for a big main event coming up against Volkov. He's up at that gym. That gym right now is red hot. And I think with that Trevor Whitman striking that he has going right now, Corey Sandhagen is going to enjoy massive advantages on the feet in this fight. Aljamain Sterling's an amazing athlete. He's an amazing grappler. But I think that Corey Sandhagen has the wrestling chops to keep this one standing, or if he gets taken down, at least get back up. And when they're on the feet, I think it's going to be all Corey Sandhagen. I don't want to bet against Trevor Whitman's trained guys right now as good as they've looked. I'm taking Corey Sandhagen minus 110.
Excellent breakdown. Matthew Holt, our guest, U.S. Integrity.
That could be the best fight in the card, too.
I agree.
What do you think of the O'Malley fight? I saw him get it actually higher than $5 at one book last night. Right now on our screen that we're showing here, Matthew, it looks like minus 455 at DraftKings. Do you think Wineland is live here?
I do think he's live because, again, we talked about underdogs' path to victory, especially big underdogs. And we said, look, it's hard to find one for Felicia Spencer, but it's easy to find one for Eddie Wineland, who's a major knockout artist, even at 135 pounds, and basically could put your lights out with one shot and has a lot of experience. I mean, fought Henan Barral for the bantamweight title at one point. So I certainly think Eddie Wineland's live, but I also think Eddie Wineland's winding down at this point. 35 years old, been in a lot of wars, taking a lot of damage. I do think Sean O'Malley is overrated because people like his style, they like his haircut, they like his charisma. But I also think as a fighter, he has a lot of maturing still left to do. So Eddie Wineland's certainly live. I certainly wouldn't be laying the minus 500, but I'm not actually in a rush to get out and bet the underdog in this one.
Okay, fair enough. Anything on the Garbrandt fight?
That's an interesting fight, too. And I look toward the under here a little bit in this fight. 9 of Cody Garbrandt's 11 wins have come by knockout. And in fact, I think only once in his last 4 fights, his last 4 wins, did he go to a decision, and that was against Dominic Cruz in a fight where he knocked Dominic Cruz down like 5 or 6 times in that fight. And he's been knocked out himself in 3 straight fights. And that starts to play into the mental aspect of a fighter of can you even take a shot when you get hit after being knocked out 3 straight times. Rafael Assunção, who is one of the more underrated fighters in the history of UFC at 135 pounds, he's now 37 years old. And what we tend to see with older fighters is their chin tends to go first. The speed tends to go a little bit. This is a division where you need speed. And we saw him get finished just 1 fight ago by Marlon Moraes. So it's 2.5 over minus 225, minus 120, minus 125. You can get the under at plus money for a couple of guys that tend to finish fights, or in the case of Garbrandt, get finished, as we've seen with 3 consecutive knockout losses. So maybe at even money on the under, a little bit of value there.
All right, Matt Holt, how about Evan Dunham plus 200 against Herbert Burns? That's one of your best bets. What are your best bets on this card to wrap it up?
Yeah, I actually like Evan Dunham here as a live dog. I thought that it was an interesting scenario. Herbert Burns, similar to what we saw with Shevchenko last week, you're paying a premium for the name here. After the amazing performance Gilbert Burns put on in the main event versus Tyron Woodley last week, you are paying a premium to bet on his brother here. Evan Dunham, coincidentally, got knocked out in consecutive fights, his last 2 fights, by body blows. That is so rare in the UFC to even see any fight end with a body shot. The fact that it happened twice in Evan Dunham, that's a little bit fluky to land that perfect liver shot twice in a row. And what I really liked is 3 fights back against Beneil Dariush in a fight where he was getting mauled and almost stopped in the first round. He came back and rallied to win rounds 2 and 3 to end up getting a draw versus Dariush. I think Herbert Burns is going to be really dangerous early in both the submissions and the striking game, but I think he could start to fade at the end of round 1, early round 2, and I could see a situation where Evan Dunham loses round 1, rallies to win rounds 2 and 3, and maybe steals one here at plus 200.
Excellent. Follow Matthew on Twitter. He is at Matthew Holt, USI. He's with US Integrity. Thanks so much for the time today. Good luck tomorrow night, Matthew.
Thanks, guys. Best of luck with the card. Have a great weekend.
And there you go. That would also present.
He does a great job picking winners in the UFC. He's also on Doug Kazarian's podcast this week, Behind the Bets on ESPN.com.
I think what he just talked about in the Dunham fight, that would also be potentially, I mean, if you're trying to predict, you know how we do like game flow in regular games? Well, how about fight flow? That would be a great spot then in play wagering. Because if he's already 2-1 to win the fight and he loses maybe round 1, the other guy slows down a little bit, you'll be able to find a really good number at that point too.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
Actually looking forward to this UFC 250 card now, even though I think the main event's going to be a dud.
I'll see you tomorrow downtown.
Okay,
Yep.
at the D.
Yep, and if anybody's coming to Las Vegas, we'll be there around 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. We'll see you.